The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor before anyone realized it had slipped from Adeline Rowe's hand. The sharp crack silenced the laughter for half a second. Crystals splintered, liquid splashed across polished white stone, and every head in the ballroom turned toward her. Celeste Ashbourne was the first to speak. "Oh dear," she said lightly, her voice floating above the orchestra. "I suppose these floors can be intimidating if you're not used to them." A ripple of laughter followed, soft, polite, cruel. Adeline bent slowly, ignoring the sting in her palm where a shard had grazed her skin. A uniformed attendant rushed forward, flustered. "I'm so sorry, ma'am." "It was my fault," Adeline said gently, rising with quiet composure. She handed the napkin back to him. "Please don't trouble yourself." But the damage wasn't the broken glass. It was the eyes. The whispers. The shift. The Crown Benefit Gala glittered around her. Cascading chandeliers, diamond necklaces, tailored tuxedos, curated conversations about art, philanthropy, and power. This was Celeste's kingdom, and tonight Adeline had just been reminded of her position in it. Marcus Vale stepped to her side, his hand brushing her lower back. "Are you all right?" he murmured. "I'm fine. You're bleeding." She glanced down. A thin line of red traced her palm, insignificant. "So are they," she said quietly. Across the room, Celeste was smiling, accepting compliments as though nothing had happened. But her gaze flickered toward Adeline, measuring, satisfied. Marcus leaned closer. "Say the word." Adeline inhaled slowly, steadying herself. "Not yet." "Adeline." "Not yet," she repeated. He studied her face. There was no tremor in her voice, no tears threatening to fall, just calculation. Minutes later, the orchestra softened as Celeste ascended the stage. She was luminous in silver silk, her voice smooth as aged wine. "We gather tonight," Celeste began, "to celebrate integrity in philanthropy." Adeline almost smiled. "Integrity." The irony pressed against her ribs. Celeste continued, "And we are proud to announce that the Ashbourne Foundation has exceeded projected donor pledges by 30% this quarter." Applause thundered. Adeline's stomach tightened. 30%. That number had cost her more than dignity. 2 weeks ago, her community literacy initiative had lost 3 major donors overnight. Each had cited uncertainty about sustainability. Each had shifted their support to the Ashbourne Foundation. It hadn't felt like coincidence. Now, listening to that inflated applause, it felt like confirmation. After the speech, a silver-haired donor approached Adeline with a sympathetic smile. "My dear, I heard about your proposal setbacks. It's such a shame. Perhaps next year with stronger backing." "Perhaps," Adeline replied smoothly. When he walked away, Marcus exhaled sharply. "This is targeted." "Yes." "She's undermining you." "Yes." "And you're standing here bleeding." Adeline looked down at her palm again. The blood had stopped. "I prefer observation to reaction." Marcus studied her profile. "You think she's vulnerable." "I think everyone is." They moved through the rest of the evening like pieces on a chessboard. Adeline watched more than she spoke. She noticed who deferred to Celeste, who looked uncomfortable, who avoided certain financial conversations. She saw the subtle pressure Celeste exerted, touching an elbow here, interrupting gently there, redirecting praise with a velvet smile. It wasn't dominance by force. It was dominance by narrative. Later, near the balcony overlooking the city, Celeste approached her. "I hope you weren't embarrassed earlier," Celeste said sweetly. "These events can be overwhelming." Adeline met her gaze. "I've attended many." "Oh, of course, but hosting is different from attending." There it was. Ownership. Celeste leaned closer. Philanthropy requires stamina. Not everyone is built for the long game. Adeline tilted her head slightly. "And what is the long game?" "Relevance," Celeste replied. "Staying indispensable." A beat of silence stretched between them. "You're very good at appearing indispensable," Adeline said softly. Celeste's smile sharpened. "Appearances are everything." As Celeste walked away, Marcus joined her again. "She's baiting you." Adeline's gaze remained fixed on the ballroom below. "No, she's revealing herself." "What's the plan?" I don't have one yet. That worries me. She turned to him, her voice calm but firm. Emotion clouds timing. I need clarity first. He searched her face for cracks. There were none. You could end this, Marcus said quietly. One phone call, one board inquiry, I have leverage. And prove her right, Adeline asked, that I can only win through you. Marcus didn't respond. I won't borrow power, she continued. I'll build it. Below them, Celeste laughed brightly, surrounded by admirers. Adeline watched carefully. She noticed the way Celeste's smile faltered when one of the board members whispered something urgent in her ear. She noticed the way Celeste's fingers tightened around her clutch. She noticed the flicker. Tiny, but real. And in that flicker, Adeline felt something shift inside her. Not anger, not humiliation, but resolve. They think I'm fragile, she murmured. Marcus followed her gaze. Are you? Adeline's lips curved faintly. No. The orchestra swelled again, music rising toward the vaulted ceiling. The gala shimmered on, unaware that its balance had already begun to tilt. Because humiliation had not broken her. It had focused her. And focus, when sharpened by patience, could become something far more dangerous than outrage. Adeline pressed the napkin against her palm once more, then let it fall into a passing tray. Let them celebrate tonight, she said quietly. Marcus watched her carefully, and tomorrow. Her eyes remained steady on Celeste across the room. Tomorrow, she replied, I start listening. By the following afternoon, Adeline had already memorized the seating chart from the gala. Not because she cared about who wore emeralds or who arrived with which hedge fund manager, but because proximity told stories. Who sat beside Celeste, who sat across from her, who had been moved from last year's inner table to the periphery. Patterns were louder than insults. Marcus watched her from the doorway of their study as she spread photographs and handwritten notes across the desk. You didn't sleep, he observed. I rested. That isn't the same. Adeline didn't look up. Mrs. Delacroix was seated 2 places farther from Celeste this year. She's 82. She also controls a $12 million arts endowment. Marcus crossed the room slowly. You're mapping them. I'm understanding them. He leaned against the desk. And what exactly are you looking for? A fracture. He exhaled. Adeline, if this becomes war. It won't. You're preparing for it like one. She finally lifted her gaze to his. War is loud, this is structural. That evening she accepted an invitation to a smaller Ashbourne luncheon, an intimate gathering of mid-level donors and advisory board members. Not glamorous, not photographed, but important. When she arrived, Celeste greeted her with theatrical warmth. Adeline, how lovely that you could make time. Adeline smiled pleasantly. It sounded meaningful. Oh, it is. We're discussing sustainability metrics. Transparency is essential for that, Adeline said, taking a seat. Celeste's eyes flickered just briefly. The luncheon unfolded politely. Financial summaries were distributed. Future initiatives were praised. Adeline listened. She noticed the hesitation when one board member asked about the 30% growth claim. She noticed the way Celeste answered, confident but vague. Projected pledges. Anticipated conversions. Strategic optimism. After the meeting, a younger advisory member named Thomas lingered near the exit. Mrs. Rowe, he said quietly, your literacy initiative, I read the proposal, it was strong. Thank you. I was surprised when funding shifted. So was I. He hesitated. Sometimes numbers look better before they're audited. Adeline held his gaze. And are these? He swallowed, not yet. She didn't press further. She didn't need to. Later that week, she visited the Meridian Foundation offices under the pretense of reviewing partnership opportunities. She requested public financial filings. Everything was technically compliant. But compliance wasn't the same as truth. Back home, Marcus found her reviewing spreadsheets. You found something. I found optimism disguised as certainty. That's not illegal. No, but it's unstable. Yes, Marcus ran a hand through his hair. You're thinking of destabilizing them. I'm thinking of allowing gravity to work. He studied her carefully. You're angry. I was, she admitted. Now I'm precise. That night, Celeste hosted a private wine tasting for select patrons. Adeline attended in navy silk, understated but deliberate. The room buzzed with curated charm, soft jazz, controlled laughter. Celeste approached her with a glass of Bordeaux. I admire your resilience, Celeste said smoothly. Some people retreat after setbacks. I don't consider clarity a setback. Celeste tilted her head. Clarity. Yes, it's clarifying to see where loyalties truly lie. A flicker again. You sound suspicious. I sound observant. Celeste leaned closer, her voice lowering. You're out of your depth here. Adeline didn't step back. Depth is relative. Do you really believe you can compete at this level? I'm not competing. Celeste's smile thinned. Then what are you doing? Learning. For a split second, something like irritation flashed across Celeste's face. You should be careful, Celeste said quietly. Curiosity can isolate you. Adeline's voice remained even. So can arrogance. They held each other's gaze, tension humming between them like a drawn wire. Across the room, Marcus observed silently. When Celeste drifted away, he approached. That was sharper than usual. She wanted reaction. And you gave her resistance. I gave her truth. He lowered his voice. Adeline, she's escalating. So am I. The following days moved quickly. Adeline arranged a small dinner at their townhouse, nothing ostentatious. Warm lighting, thoughtful conversation. A handful of independent donors who valued transparency over spectacle. She spoke openly about measurable impact. She presented real data, conservative projections, third-party audits already scheduled. No glitter. Just substance. One donor, Mrs. Delacroix, the same woman moved 2 seats outward at the gala, watched her thoughtfully. You don't promise miracles, the older woman said. I promise accountability, Adeline replied. Mrs. Delacroix nodded slowly. That's rarer. By the end of the evening, 2 tentative pledges were quietly redirected. Not announced. Not celebrated. Just shifted. The next morning, Celeste called her directly. How proactive of you, Celeste said, her voice cool. I assume you're referring to dinner. I'm referring to poaching. Adeline leaned back in her chair. No one is owned. You're undermining established relationships. I'm offering alternatives. A pause. You think you're clever, Celeste said. I think I'm patient. Celeste's tone hardened. Be careful, Adeline, this circle protects its own. And does it? Adeline asked softly. Silence. Then the line went dead. Marcus entered moments later. I heard raised voices. She's unsettled. That makes her dangerous. It makes her predictable. He stepped closer. What's your next move? Adeline's eyes drifted toward the window, where the city skyline stretched cold and bright. The board reviews projections next week, she said quietly. They value credibility. You're going to challenge her publicly. No, she replied. I'm going to ask questions. And if she retaliates? Adeline's jaw tightened slightly. Then she confirms everything. Marcus studied her expression. You're enjoying this, he said carefully. No, she answered. I'm reclaiming equilibrium. Outside, the city moved unaware of the silent realignment underway. Celeste still believed she controlled the narrative. But narratives, Adeline knew now, depended on belief. And belief could erode. One careful question at a time. The email arrived at 6:12 a.m. Adeline was already awake. She read it once, then again. Subject line, board review clarification required. She felt it before she fully processed it, the tremor beneath the surface. Marcus stepped into the kitchen, loosening his tie. You look like you're about to dissect something. They've scheduled an emergency metrics review. He paused already. Yes. That was fast. It means someone else noticed. He poured coffee slowly. Are you certain you want to be in that room? Yes. And if she attacks you directly? Adeline's fingers curled lightly around her mug. Then she loses composure. Marcus watched her carefully. You're counting on that. I'm counting on pressure. The board meeting was held in a long glass conference room overlooking the river. Sunlight streamed in mercilessly, illuminating every expression. Celeste was already seated at the head of the table when Adeline entered. She didn't smile. Neither did Adeline. Thomas sat 2 chairs down, visibly tense. The chairman cleared his throat. We've received requests for clarification regarding projected pledge growth. Celeste folded her hands neatly. Of course, we anticipated enthusiasm would outpace formal documentation. Adeline leaned forward slightly. Would you mind clarifying the conversion rate assumptions? Celeste's eyes shifted toward her. Their industry standard. Which standard? Adeline asked gently. The room stilled. Celeste answered smoothly. Preliminary verbal commitments historically convert at 70%. Thomas shifted uncomfortably. Adeline's voice remained calm. Historically for which quarter? A pause. For comparable cycles. Would you be willing to circulate the comparative data? Adeline continued. Celeste's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Certainly. The chairman interjected. We'd appreciate that. The meeting moved on, but the air had changed. Afterward, Celeste cornered Adeline in the hallway. You're crossing a line. I asked a question. You're implying dishonesty. I'm requesting clarity. Celeste's composure thinned. You think this makes you look competent? I think it makes me responsible. You're trying to embarrass me. No, Adeline replied quietly. I'm giving you opportunity. Celeste stepped closer. You have no idea what you're interfering with. Adeline met her gaze without blinking. Then enlighten me. For a moment, Celeste looked almost unsettled. You don't belong here, Celeste said finally. Adeline's voice softened, but it did not waver. That's not for you to decide. That evening, the retaliation came. A blog post circulated anonymously questioning the experience and qualifications behind Adeline's literacy initiative. It suggested her funding shifts were due to mismanagement. Marcus found her reading it at midnight. She's escalating, he said flatly. Yes. Now it's personal. It always was. He knelt beside her chair. Let me respond. No. Adeline, this is reputational damage. She turned to him, eyes sharp. And what happens if you step in? They'll back down. And confirm that I need rescuing. His jaw clenched. You don't. Then let me prove it. He searched her face. What if it hurts? It already does. The next day, 2 minor donors withdrew tentative pledges. It stung. Not because of the money, but because Celeste was testing her endurance. Adeline stood in her office, staring at the skyline. For a moment, just one, her composure cracked. Maybe I miscalculated, she whispered to herself. Marcus entered quietly. You didn't. She's stronger than I anticipated. So are you. She turned sharply. Strength isn't invulnerability. No, he said softly, it's persistence. Her voice trembled slightly. What if patience isn't enough? Then adapt. She inhaled slowly. Adapt. That night she made 3 calls. Not to retaliate. To reinforce. She contacted Mrs. Delacroix and offered a transparent audit preview. She invited Thomas to privately review her initiative's full documentation. She reached out to an independent oversight consultant she had quietly retained weeks earlier. The following morning, she received confirmation. The consultant had identified discrepancies in projected donor conversions within the Ashbourne filings. Not criminal, but materially misleading. Adeline didn't celebrate. She scheduled a formal presentation request for the upcoming Crown Benefit Ball. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You're going public. I'm presenting impact. Timing. Impeccable. He studied her face. You're nervous. Yes. And I'm ready. Meanwhile, Celeste's circle tightened. She hosted back-to-back meetings, consolidating loyalty. But something subtle was shifting. Board members were asking more questions. Donors were requesting written confirmations. Whispers were no longer about Adeline's fragility. They were about numbers. At a pre-gala rehearsal, Celeste approached her again. "You're very persistent," Celeste said coolly. "I'm consistent. You're trying to embarrass me at my own event." Adeline's expression remained composed. "Your event." Celeste's eyes flashed. "You think this ends with applause for you?" "No," Adeline replied softly. "I think it ends with accountability." Celeste stepped closer, voice low and sharp. "If you go through with this, you'll make enemies." Adeline didn't retreat. "I already have one." For a split second, Celeste looked almost wounded. Then the mask returned. "Be careful," she whispered. "Sometimes when structures fall, they crush everyone beneath them." Adeline watched her walk away. Marcus joined her moments later. "She's rattled." "Yes. That makes her unpredictable." Adeline's voice was steady now. "No, it makes her desperate." He touched her hand gently. "Are you afraid?" She considered the question. "Yes," she admitted, "but I'm more afraid of silence." The ballroom preparations continued around them. Floral installations, lighting adjustments, orchestra tuning. In 2 nights, the Crown Benefit Ball would draw every major donor, every board member, every journalist who mattered. Celeste believed she would reclaim dominance. Adeline intended to redefine it. Not with spectacle, with substance. As she stood beneath the unfinished chandelier, looking up at the web of crystal and steel, she felt the weight of the coming confrontation. Not explosive, inevitable. And for the first time since the champagne glass shattered on marble, she allowed herself to feel something close to anticipation. Because escalation had reached its peak. And gravity, once triggered, did not reverse. The night of the Crown Benefit Ball arrived like a storm wrapped in silk and chandeliers. The Meridian Hall shimmered with golden light, each crystal catching reflections of gowns and tuxedos. Adeline adjusted the navy silk drape around her shoulders one last time and felt the weight of the evening settle over her like a cloak. Marcus stepped beside her, offering a reassuring nod. "They're expecting fireworks," he murmured. Adeline's lips curved faintly. "Let them watch a quiet fire burn instead." The room was packed, donors, board members, society journalists. Cameras flashed as Celeste Ashbourne floated through her domain, radiating charisma. She greeted everyone with flawless smiles and an impeccable air of control. The orchestra played a soft waltz that barely masked the hum of murmurs, gossip, and the tension brewing just beneath polite conversation. Adeline moved slowly, confidently toward the front of the room, clipboard in hand. Every step was deliberate. Eyes followed her. Whispers spread like a ripple across water. She noticed those who had quietly shifted allegiance over the past weeks, those who had once ignored her or doubted her competence. Now many were leaning forward, curious, tentative, waiting to see what she might do. Celeste, noticing her approach, paused mid-handshake. Her smile remained, but her eyes flickered, a tiny break in the otherwise unshakable mask she wore. "Mrs. Rowe," Celeste said smoothly, voice carrying just enough for those nearby to hear, "what brings you here at the center of attention?" "I came to present impact," Adeline replied, her voice calm and steady, echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged hall. Celeste arched an eyebrow. "Impact?" "Yes," Adeline said, meeting her gaze with unwavering composure. "Transparent, measurable impact, something I believe donors deserve to see firsthand." A hush began to settle. The orchestra seemed to fade as board members and donors pivoted slightly, curious. Adeline felt Marcus's hand brush her elbow, a small, grounding touch. The chairman of the board stepped forward. "Mrs. Rowe has requested a moment to present the progress of her community literacy initiative." Celeste's smile was flawless, but tension ran beneath it like a current. Adeline adjusted the notes on her clipboard and stepped forward, projecting calm authority. "Thank you," she began. "This evening, I'd like to share the tangible results of our literacy initiative and the measurable outcomes we've achieved in just the last 6 months." She clicked the remote. The first slide illuminated the massive screen behind her, charts, figures, and photos of children reading, schools equipped with new materials, and workshops actively in session. She moved methodically, speaking clearly, emphasizing the real numbers, the oversight, the accountability measures she had implemented. Transparency and accountability are not just virtues, she said. They are obligations. Every donor deserves the truth. Every child deserves impact. The room leaned in. Celeste shifted slightly, clearly measuring, calculating, anticipating. She tried to interject once, soft and polite, but Adeline anticipated it. With a subtle gesture, she continued, her tone unwavering, leaving Celeste momentarily without ground to regain. Thomas, sitting 2 chairs down, glanced at her with subtle admiration. Others whispered, not maliciously, but in surprise at the clarity and force of her presentation. Donors who had once wavered now nodded quietly, pens scribbling notes. Adeline concluded, her voice firm but gentle. What we do here tonight is not about social status, appearances, or fleeting applause. It is about accountability, integrity, and the meaningful impact we can make together. Thank you. Applause rose slowly, building into genuine, respectful acknowledgement. Not loud, not ostentatious, but earned. Celeste clapped too, her hands poised, yet the subtle tension in her posture betrayed unease. For the first time, she wasn't in complete control of attention. Later, in a quiet corner of the ballroom, Celeste approached her again. "You planned this," she said softly, a mixture of admiration and irritation in her voice. "I prepared," Adeline corrected gently. "You've humiliated me." "I haven't humiliated anyone," Adeline said evenly. "I've only shown what was already there." Celeste's eyes narrowed. "You're dangerous." Adeline smiled faintly. "I'm responsible, that's different." The private confrontation ended with no overt theatrics, no shouting, no dramatics. Celeste left, her composure still intact but subtly fractured. Adeline remained poised, unshaken. Afterward, Marcus found her in a quiet hallway. "You could have crushed her," he murmured. "I didn't want to," Adeline replied softly. "That would make me like her." He studied her. "You're unstoppable when you choose patience over reaction." "Yes," she said quietly, feeling the adrenaline finally settle into calm. "And I intend to stay that way." The next day, the city's newspapers and social blogs carried glowing accounts of the evening. But they weren't headlines about Celeste Ashbourne's glamour or dominance. They were about Adeline Rowe, the methodical, intelligent, and accountable leader of a transformative literacy initiative. Social media buzzed with praise for her clarity, composure, and leadership. Celeste's control over the narrative weakened. She still wielded influence, but the subtle cracks were visible now. Board members approached Adeline privately, offering their support. Donors began redirecting pledges, and for the first time in months, Adeline felt the quiet satisfaction of momentum building. In her townhouse that night, Adeline and Marcus reviewed the day. He held her hand tightly. "You've shifted everything." "I've only allowed what was inevitable," she replied, sipping her tea. "Patience, clarity, and a little observation go further than anger." Marcus smiled faintly. "And yet you made it feel effortless." Adeline leaned back, gazing out the window at the city lights. "It's never effortless, but appearances like control are overrated. Substance wins." The night stretched quietly, unhurried, yet underneath, the social ecosystem had already begun to tilt. Celeste Ashbourne's once unshakable authority was no longer absolute, and Adeline Rowe, once underestimated and undermined, was now quietly, powerfully in command. By the time she finally closed her eyes that night, Adeline felt a calm satisfaction unlike any she had known. Not triumph through spectacle, not revenge through humiliation, but through patient, deliberate, intelligent action, the kind of victory that could not be undone. And in the shadows of her success, she allowed herself a small thought. Tomorrow would be another test, another opportunity to measure resolve, another chance to deepen influence. But tonight, for the first time, she slept with the certainty that she had reclaimed her dignity, her narrative, and her place. Not by shouting, not by vengeance, but through composure, intelligence, and the quiet assertion of strength. The storm of marble floors, shattered glass, and whispered gossip had passed, and in its place stood something stronger, a steady, unyielding, quiet power that no laughter could undermine, no social maneuver could shake. Adeline had won, and she knew that from now on the world would watch her carefully. Morning light spilled across the townhouse, warm and unhurried. Adeline rose early, not out of necessity but habit. The city below stirred slowly, traffic humming, the distant chatter of early commuters weaving into the rhythm of daybreak. She moved through her study, reviewing notes from the previous evening, recalibrating strategies, and anticipating the inevitable ripple effects from the gala. Marcus joined her with 2 cups of coffee. "They're talking," he said, his tone a mixture of awe and admiration. Adeline raised an eyebrow. "Who exactly?" "The donors, board members, even the journalists who covered the event. Celeste's dominance has been diminished, quietly but noticeably." She took a slow sip, letting the warmth steady her. "Not diminished," she corrected softly, "redirected." He leaned against the doorway. "And Celeste? She's unsettled. She thinks she's preparing her counter, but she's reacting, not acting." The morning passed with phone calls and emails confirming new support for her initiative. Each message reinforced what she already knew. Momentum was hers. But Adeline understood that this was only the beginning. Influence was not static, and patience could not substitute for consistency. Later that day, she visited the new Community Literacy Center, where construction had nearly finished. Walking through the corridors, seeing shelves stacked with freshly printed books and classrooms ready for children, she felt a tangible shift in energy. This was impact in motion, visible, measurable, undeniable. A volunteer approached, handing her a file of projected enrollment statistics. "Mrs. Rowe," he said nervously, "these numbers, our first projections, look strong, really strong." Adeline scanned the data, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Strong, yes, but not perfect. We'll need follow-ups, audits, and transparent reporting at every step, nothing less." The volunteer nodded, clearly impressed by her thoroughness. "Absolutely, Mrs. Rowe." Outside, the city shimmered under the afternoon sun. Adeline stood on the steps, feeling the weight of expectation and responsibility, and yet a profound sense of calm. She had endured humiliation, subtle sabotage, and whispered doubts. She had been underestimated, dismissed, even mocked. And now, slowly, methodically, she was reclaiming her narrative. Back at the townhouse, Marcus joined her again, quiet this time, just standing beside her. "You've changed the playing field," he said softly. "I didn't change it," she replied. "I revealed what was already possible." The phone rang. A brief glance showed a board member seeking private consultation. Another donor requested an in-person discussion about funding allocation. Adeline smiled faintly. Small steps, each deliberate. Influence accumulated quietly, imperceptibly, until it became undeniable. That evening, a private message arrived from Celeste. Short, precise, "We need to talk." Adeline read it twice, then set the phone down. No rush, no reaction. She knew the meaning behind those words: acknowledgement of change, admission of vulnerability, perhaps even respect mingled with frustration. Marcus noticed. "You're not responding." "I don't need to," she said. "Words matter less than action. She knows that now." The following week solidified her position. Celeste attempted minor interventions, reassigning events, issuing subtle memos, but each move was anticipated and countered by Adeline's strategic foresight. Every interaction, every board meeting, every donor conversation further cemented the new balance of power. Adeline walked through the final preparations for the Literacy Center's grand opening. Volunteers placed chairs, arranged displays, and hung banners with care. She paused for a moment, taking in the scene, the culmination of months of meticulous planning, observation, and patient execution. The children who would benefit from this initiative were still unseen, but their potential was already palpable, manifesting in the order, readiness, and energy around her. Marcus joined her once more, quiet admiration evident. "You've done something remarkable." Adeline shook her head slightly, a serene smile on her lips. "Not remarkable," she said, "necessary." The center opened the next morning. Families arrived, children in tow, their eyes wide with curiosity and excitement. Donors observed discreetly, genuinely impressed. Adeline moved among them, greeting, guiding, explaining. Each conversation was purposeful, grounded in authenticity, devoid of the pretense that had characterized previous interactions with Celeste's circle. In the back office, she reviewed attendance lists, volunteer schedules, and progress metrics. Each figure, each note, each subtle adjustment reinforced the reality she had been building, influence rooted in clarity, integrity, and patient persistence. By afternoon, the opening event had run smoothly. Cameras captured children exploring the space, donors nodding in quiet approval, volunteers moving efficiently. There was no fanfare, no spectacle, but impact radiated unmistakably. Later, as the sun dipped low, Adeline stood at the front steps, watching families leave, smiling, interacting. Marcus approached and placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You've done it," he said softly. "I've done what was possible," she replied, "and it's only the beginning." They stood together in the golden evening light, the city sprawling beneath them, the quiet hum of daily life continuing undisturbed, yet altered subtly by the foundations she had set. Adeline had turned humiliation into strength, doubt into clarity, and patience into power. She had faced the arrogance of Celeste Ashbourne and emerged not with vengeance, but with a steady, undeniable authority. Later that night, alone in her study, Adeline allowed herself a brief reflection. She could replay every insult, every whisper, every calculated move Celeste had made against her. But she didn't. Those moments were no longer chains. They were lessons, building blocks of strategy and restraint. She opened her journal and wrote a single line: "Strength is silent, persistent, and deliberate. It does not shout, it endures." Outside, the city lights flickered against the darkening sky. The marble floors, the shattered champagne glass, the whispered doubts of weeks past. They existed only in memory now, echoes of a challenge met and transcended. Adeline stood and moved to the window, looking out over the city. She thought of the future, of children reading, of donors aligned, of trust established. She thought of Celeste and of the inevitable shifts yet to come. But there was no anxiety, only clarity. Because Adeline Rowe had discovered something that could never be taken from her, that true power was quiet, unyielding, and grounded in patience, intelligence, and dignity. She had endured, she had observed, she had acted. And she had won, not by shouting, not by humiliation, not by spectacle, but by building something stronger than fleeting social dominance. A foundation of integrity, influence, and lasting impact. She allowed herself a small, contented smile. Tomorrow, as always, would be another day, another opportunity, another chance to measure patience against ambition, dignity against arrogance. But tonight, she rested in the certainty that she had reclaimed her narrative, her power, and her place. The quiet triumph lingered, steadfast and undeniable, and for Adeline that was enough.